Thursday before the Super Bowl. It is right around the corner. And we're going to be talking, coming up to Andy. We're going to be talking to Andy Slater coming up. Andy Slater, of course, of Fox Sports Radio 640 in South Florida and Miami. Andy Slater will be joining us coming up from Miami. And then later on, Matt Lombardo. You know him, you love him, you can't live without him. Friend of the show, FOS, Sports by Brooks, Fancred, Matt Lombardo coming up later on in the show. Covers the New York Giants. Had a big article about Dave Gettleman, which we love, and we'll talk about that coming up. And Matt's also kind of one of our spies down in South Florida, so we can find out what the hell's going on down there, as is Andy Slater. My name is Brooks Melchior, joined by our producer, as always, Cam Smith. And we do this every weekday, noon Eastern time. Tomorrow, Michelle Tafoya will join us from NBC's Sunday Night Football in America. So that'll be fun. So, but coming up, we're going to talk to Andy Slater and Fox Sports Radio 640, all one word on Twitter. iHeartRadio, all one word on Twitter. Andy Slater, all one word, no underscores. No Bobby Burak weird underscores at the end of your Twitter handle on Twitter, Andy Slater. And Andy Slater is a guy who is, to me, if you're flying into Miami right about now, you're getting ready to go in for Super Bowl weekend, right? As I'm sure some people still are or will be. Andy Slater is the guy that you want to talk to, that you want to know. At least I would. He would be a guy who I would be calling as I got off the plane in Miami International, because if anybody has a handle on what the heck's going on in South Florida, help you navigate that situation, it's this guy, Andy Slater. So let's bring him up right now. Fox Sports Radio 640, afternoon drive, 3 to 5 Eastern time, talk show host. And how you doing, Andy? I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for dropping by.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Brooks. We've talked a bunch. It's nice to see you. And there's a lot going on behind me here in the Miami Beach Convention Center on Radio Row. It's a busy day. I just got here about 20 minutes ago, and I'll be here probably for the next 6 or 7 hours.
Wow. So, yeah, let's get the lay of the land. And I don't know if you heard what I said, but if there's one guy, you're one of those guys who knows what to do on the Super Bowl weekend, week, the 2 weeks, whatever it is. But so first of all, you've got the stadium, and it's kind of up there, up I-95, I guess. I don't know if it's I-95, but, you know, I'm not all that familiar with the geography. Go ahead and slap me down on whatever the details are if I'm wrong on them. But what about the whole setup? Because you're at the convention center. So what does that all entail for people to come down and visit from the media?
First, it entails a lot of traffic. Getting
right
around South Florida, you know, today, tomorrow, and Saturday, and obviously Sunday is going to be a lot. But what they've done here for this Super Bowl, and it's been about, I believe, 10 years since the Super Bowl's been here in South Florida, they've spread it all out, and they've really kept it all in Miami. Miami is super big, as you know. So you're talking about what would be, let's say, a 40-minute drive has now turned into about an hour and a half. But you got the stadium. It's on the north end of Miami-Dade County in the Miami Beach Convention Center, all the way south and all the way to the east, obviously, right. And they've got parties going on in downtown Miami. You've got everyone flying in Miami International Airport. A lot of people flying to Fort Lauderdale International Airport as well. Their hotel. You've got yachts out here. You've got big buildings. You've got big mansions. You've got this big convention center. And there's just a lot going on, and it's only Thursday.
Unbelievable. It is unbelievable. This is one of those uniquely American phenomena, Super Bowl week. So, Andy, if I'm a guy who's just getting off the plane right now and coming in, let's say I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan because I'm from Kansas City, grew up there, and it is very much a surreal experience. And I scored a Super Bowl ticket, and I'm flying into South Florida. What would you tell me? What should I be doing? What should I be looking to do?
Well, you got to hit up Joe Stonecraft.
Right.
I mean, that's my
South
spot.
Beach?
That's like everybody's spot. South Beach, yep, Person, Washington, and South Beach. And tonight, tomorrow, Saturday night, it's going to be packed. They've got lunch. And this isn't some paid advertisement. You can look at my Twitter feed, my Instagram. I'm at Joe's all the time. That's a spot you got to hit. And then you got to pick at least one party if you're going to do the South Florida experience. And there is a long, long list of parties going on here. Some are free, and some are up to about $20,000 or $25,000. But you've heard about them. Shaq's going to be here. Rob Gronkowski, he's going to be here doing a party. Lizzo's got a performance tonight, actually right down the block here from the Miami Beach Convention Center. Obviously, she's super popular. There's a long list of parties. You got to do at least one. And then you got to hit up a casino. You got to get a little gambling in there, whether it's poker, blackjack, Ultimate Texas Hold'em, the brand new Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Hollywood. They got this monstrous Qatar Hotel. It's a little bit north of Miami, but it's maybe 5 miles north of Hard Rock Stadium. So you combine all of that, good food, a party, a little casino action, and then the game, that's going to be a pretty good trip to South Florida. Just don't take that trip to jail. Stay out of trouble. And so far, everybody has, at least that I know.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll see. Here you're the guy, and I want to talk about that in a second. I want to be specific about one of our favorite NFL players here in a second, a story that I know you've been out in front on. That is Antonio Brown. But before we get to that specifically, and we're going to talk a little bit about the game and what your thoughts are, and maybe drop in some Dolphins talk, perhaps, and Tua and all that as it entails. I don't want to keep you too long, but
no, it's okay.
Boy, does this ever sound like something that's perfect for Uber and Lyft right now? If there was ever the business model works right here, does it not?
I'll tell you what, if you're ever going to become an Uber driver, this would be the week to do it. Probably make a fortune just driving 1 week for Uber or Lyft around Miami Beach or South Florida with all the events going on. I've driven everywhere, so I'm used to traffic. I feel like there's traffic everywhere.
Right.
Los Angeles, there's everywhere you're going to find traffic, so I'm used to it. But I haven't checked the Uber app. But tonight, tomorrow night, and Saturday, those prices, they're going to have that lightning bolt on them. It's going to be some pretty expensive stuff.
Visit with Andy Slater of Fox Sports Radio 640 in South Florida, in Miami, and a guy who breaks news. And so can you describe, for people who don't know about Slater Scoops, I'm very well appraised of Slater Scoops, have been for many years. But what is it that, I know you do a talk show, and thank God you do, to inform people of what's going on. But talk a little bit about what you do, what your profile is in media.
I'll tell you what, Brooks, and I've said this on my show many times, sometimes my actual talk show will get in the way of a scoop, because I'll be getting a text message or a phone call from a source, or even 15 or 20 minutes before my show starts. I've got something on my plate that's pretty major, and I got a live show to do at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So now, all throughout the show, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got this, and I got to do it during breaks, and I don't want the show to be in a negative aspect because of what I'm trying to work on the side. But Brooks, throughout the years, and I've been doing my show for almost 12 years now, I've just created a lot of really good relationships with a lot of people from all over, whether it's teams or law enforcement. The list just goes on and on and on. So when something happens in South Florida, which I consider my backyard, just like TMZ considers Southern California, LA, their backyard. When something goes on in my backyard, I need to be the first to know about it. And there's a lot of people out there that help me out. And people ask me all the time, how much do you pay for this information? And I gotta tell you, I don't pay anything. There's no, I'm not paying for any information. I just have really good people with really good relationships that like to talk to me. And there's more and more every single day, and I love it. That's my energy. Getting a scoop, getting a text message, getting a phone call, and there's been so many of them. A lot of times it has to do with people getting in trouble, and that happens often. We've had some Dolphins get in trouble this year, other NFL players over the years. I know you wanted to get into Antonio Brown in a minute, and we will. But just that energy, putting that information out there, vetting it, having to confirm it, depending on what it is many times. Jose Fernandez, he had the tragedy 3 years ago or so here in Miami with the boat crash. And I got that story. It was a Sunday morning, Brooks, about 7:10 in the morning. And I saw my phone ring. And there's certain people's name that come up on my phone. I'm like, okay, there's something going
Right.
on here. Or I look at my phone and it says 3 or 4 messages consecutively within a minute. I know when I go look at that message, there's going to be a scoop there. There's going to be information. And like with the Jose Fernandez thing, you can't. I don't want to ever get anything wrong, obviously.
Right.
I mean, I confirm all of my information. But I confirmed that like 5 or 6 different ways. And about an hour later, I saw no one else had it out there, and I put the info out there, and it just spread like wildfire. It was unfortunate. Not all my scoops are great news, but any kind of news that I can get exclusively after it's vetted, confirmed, I go ahead and put it out there. And I've been lucky enough to have great relationships where people just can continue to do that. And I'm looking at my phone right now, 12:11 Eastern. Nothing there yet. So right now, at least for the Niners and Chiefs, everybody's behaving.
But yeah, exactly, for now. And you are the guy, though, and this stuff has happened over the years in the Super Bowl, and God knows. But I can only imagine what it would have been like to drive around with you during the weekend, or where you're at the homestead, or whatever the situation was, when the tragic news involving Kobe and his daughter and the 9 people in that helicopter. Some of the things that were going through your mind, just in general, about and we had Evan Rosenblum on of TMZ Sports earlier this week, and he was part of breaking that story with Harvey Levin. Evan, of course, a great guy and a friend of the show here, Sports by Brooks on Fancred. And but I think we have reached the point now, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, where it's laughable for people to be talking about TMZ as if it's not or Andy Slater for that matter. If you're somehow not a legitimate source because you don't have some really important old legacy logo on your business card or whatever, or on the Chiron. And so do you think we have now reached that? I mean, because here's the irony, and it's not really ironic anymore, but it was ABC television during the Pro Bowl who screwed the story up, right? And that guy's now been suspended. And I'm not saying he should be suspended, but and there were other outlets, very well-known outlets, that I heard screw the story up after TMZ reported it accurately and after they had vetted it through the family. We talked to Evan about that on this show, but have we now reached the point where we're going to get to the point, at least, where people recognize that Andy Slater and TMZ, you guys are every bit as reliable and legitimate, thank God you're out there, as these old legacy outlets?
Yeah, Brooks, you bring up a good point, and people ask me this question all the time because it comes up like, okay, well, Andy Slater's reporting it, and not everybody knows who I am. I mean, a lot of people do through my story.
But you don't have a team of lawyers. You have to be right.
Well, you have to be right. You 100% have to be right. If we're talking about a trade or some sort of transaction in sports, again, you never want to be wrong. I never want to have information out there that's wrong because I got to confirm it from multiple people. But a transaction in sports is one thing. A death or anything related with the police, an arrest, anything like that, you have to be right. You cannot get that wrong. And TMZ and your guy Evan there, they did a great job. I mean, they were right. I saw a lot of people, including the police department, were blasting them for the fact that apparently the family was not notified next of kin. Now, I've done a lot of work with law enforcement, and for those that may not know, next of kin, if unfortunately a family member, someone close to you dies, it's not a phone call where a law enforcement officer is going to call you up and say, hey, by the way, I'm sorry, but this person passed away. No, that's actually knocking on the door. Now,
right.
They may have known, I didn't hear your piece with Evan, but the family may have known before the officer knocked on the door. They may have heard it some other way, not necessarily through TMZ. But with a story like that, as long as you have it confirmed, and it goes back to my reporting with Jose Fernandez, my main thing was to have it confirmed. I had it confirmed by 5 or 6 people. With them, I don't know how many they had it confirmed by, but they got the story right, which was the most important thing. You never consider, okay, well, let me confirm that somebody has knocked on one of the Bryant's doors to let the family know. Because if you do that, and it may sound bad, but if you do that, you're not going to get the story. And in today's day and age, TMZ, myself, other news organizations, You want to have the exclusive. That's big. You saw how many retweets and how much attention they got. Somebody else would have done it. Somebody else would have done it without checking to see if the family was informed. I have a feeling, and again, you may know more than me on this because you spoke to the guys from TMZ. The family knew. I don't think the family found out because they saw a tweet from TMZ. I think they found out from somebody else, but not a law enforcement official knocking on their door. So the main thing is you got to have it right, but in the end, you have to understand a journalist perspective and somebody reporting news and exclusive and in the business to get that information out there first, but most importantly, accurately, the way that we have to report stories, the things that we have to check before we put it out.
I know.
We're visiting with Andy Slater, Fox Sports Radio 640 in South Florida and Miami, and Andy Slater on Twitter, one word, SlaterScoops.com. Go to his website, bookmark it, because if you want to know this is a hotbed of activity as it pertains to sports and media in general, South Florida, and right now with the Super Bowl in play, this is the epicenter of activity in the United States and we're talking to the guy. If something's going to happen, this is the guy who's going to tell you about it. So let's get specific briefly as it pertains to one case in particular of late and an example of your work, a perfect example, Antonio Brown. What's the latest on that situation? And give us an overview of your thoughts on that story.
Well, I'll tell you what. During my show, about a week and a half ago, I actually dedicated one segment to Antonio Brown before this latest trouble started where the arrest warrant was issued. And I said, I'm not even going to discuss Antonio Brown anymore because I feel like he's just looking for attention. Obviously there's something wrong with him, but he's looking for a lot of attention. And I feel like a lot of media is just giving him that attention. He's posting on Instagram, he's tweeting, and he's
which is the problem, you could argue. The number one problem.
Exactly. Like he's getting attention. And I said, this is it. Unless I have a scoop, I am not going to report anything on Antonio Brown.
Thank you.
Put up on his IG story. Like, I'm just not going to do it. So I'm in Medellin, Colombia a lot. I love that place, but that's another show.
Right.
So I'm there, it was last week, and I'm sitting down for dinner. Beautiful restaurant, 8,000 feet up, incredible view. The server puts the menus down. I take my phone out of my pocket, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I see a name on there. It's like 8 p.m. at night. There's 4 straight messages. Let me open this up. And it's got information about Antonio Brown. And it has a warrant out for his arrest. So I immediately go to Twitter, go to a Twitter search, because it's going to be on Twitter first. Back in the day, you would go to Google, I guess, to see if it's on like Google News.
Right.
Now, that's like 20 minutes old, right? So you got to go to Twitter. I go to Twitter search. Antonio Brown, warrant arrest. Nobody's got anything out. I start confirming things real quickly, put it up there, prompt everything, take some names out, put it up on the web. And that thing, just that one scoop about Antonio Brown having that warrant out for his arrest, it blew up. I could not believe just on one tweet how many impressions. I got 20,000 followers on Twitter, and people have hundreds of thousands. I mean, TMZ, millions. But that one tweet had like 2.7 million impressions. And that told me it's amazing, Brooks, how many people love this Antonio Brown story. It's like people love a train wreck. People love a car crash. You always got a rubberneck and you got to look. And that's how people see this Antonio Brown saga. And then the following day, he had his bond hearing. And I was listening into the bond hearing, put out the details of the shot. And that got like another 3 million impressions. So, for scoop purposes and for information purposes, I found that Antonio Brown, to my surprise, has so many people's attention. And really, Brooks, the only way I'll talk about the guy on my show or even send out a tweet is if there is a follow-up to it. But other than that, like his daily routine and what he's posting now, I'm not involved in that. If there's something law enforcement related, goes back to jail or courtroom, I'll report on it because I see that so many people are interested in it, way more than I originally thought. But obviously the guy the guy needs help. And, Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, former agent, that guy's helped out so many athletes that have been in trouble.
What are you hearing from people? What are you hearing from people in terms of his mental health and his state of mind, if anything, right now?
Well,
What have you heard particularly?
I'll tell you what, it's not something that I've heard. It's something that's known like 8 times at all. Like now, so it's helped out so many athletes in tough times. When he drops you,
Right.
he can't you, that tells me everything I need to know. Where you hear people all the time, oh, this person needs help, this woman needs help, get them help. Sometimes people are beyond help. And I'm sure Drew Rosenhaus tried to help him out in many ways possible. And if he can't do it, unfortunately, nobody can. I know they ordered a mental health evaluation in his bond hearing. I don't believe that's happened yet. It has to happen within like a 10-day period. I don't even know. I'm not familiar with mental health evaluations, but I'm not sure what the end result on that will be. But I think people, Brooks, just see this Antonio Brown story as a train wreck, and unfortunately, I don't think it's over yet. I probably have not sent out my last tweet regarding Antonio Brown.
I want to ask you about the Dolphins in 1 second, but one last thing on Antonio Brown. What is going to be the future of this particular story? Could he end up in jail? Could something happen here out of this case? Is this a serious case? What is he really facing?
Well, the actual charge, sometimes charges and their sentences are a little exaggerated. His actual charge, took place. We all know whatever took place. Antonio Brown is not going to get life in prison, even though that is the actual charge to the fullest. What's going to happen here is something most likely very simple. I don't think he's going to go back in jail, at least for this case. For his future case, well, that remains. I think this is just going to be decided in a courtroom. Antonio Brown will probably get some type of probation. He was given house arrest. That was already taken off his GPS tracker a few days ago. So they went light. And I think that sets up the future of this case for Antonio Brown as well. He made a mistake. He's made a lot of mistakes. This one landed him behind bars for 12 to 16 hours or so. Again, I don't think he's going to be behind bars for this exact charge again. It'll just be decided in the courtroom. But Brooks, if he does something stupid again, which most likely, unfortunately, he will, we may be talking about some more charges, and that'll be a different story because of what just happened now, and who knows how the judge will handle that. I just fear, as a lot of people do, that it's not something worse than jail, because obviously his mental health is not in a good state.
Visiting with Andy Slater of Fox Sports Radio 640 South Florida and SlaterScoops.com. Andy Slater, one word on Twitter. And before we let you go, got to ask you about the Dolphins. I'm giving you the hard questions that nobody else can answer for a reason, because you're the one guy that has a shot at them. Are the Dolphins going to draft Tua? What do you foresee happening with Tua there? What are you hearing?
I think for the Miami Dolphins to draft Tua, they would have to move up. They have the number 5 pick. Have a lot of
really? You move up?
I think Tua is not going to be there at number 5. And you have other teams that need quarterbacks that may want to move ahead of the Miami Dolphins. Other organizations know that the Miami Dolphins are at least interested in Tua, even though owner Stephen Ross told somebody, and it was that he really loves Joe Burrow. Well, sure, the Cincinnati Bengals do. The Dolphins would have to give up.
Get in line.
Right. Well, they have 3 first-round picks. They'd have to give up their first-round pick for next year.
I
still don't think Cincinnati would go for it. And Burrow's sitting right there for you. I mean, what does that do to your families? A lot of players, but Joe Burrow is magnificent. But directly to your question, Brooks, I think the only way the Miami Dolphins can get Tua is if they move up. I don't think he's going to be their number 5. And I don't think they're going to move up, even with that draft capital. And he's injury prone. It's fair to say that he is injury prone. If I was running the Miami Dolphins organization, I would move up to take Tua at 5. And I may not even take Tua at 5 if he's still sitting. I don't think they're going to get him. If you ask me right now, here January 30th, I don't think the Miami Dolphins are going to get two. I think somebody's going to jump in front of them, and they're not even going to have the opportunity. Now, if they would have tanked all season long and not won some football games and got on a run at the end, if they would have started Josh Rosen all season and not Ryan Fitzpatrick, then they may have had a shot where they didn't have to do anything to get to a Joe Burrow.
I'm so glad you brought up Josh Rosen. Man, that is a great question for you. What's going on? What happened to Josh Rosen? Because I heard a lot of people say, "Wow, it was something in the locker room. Flores didn't like it." What happened there?
I don't know anything about anything in the locker room there, and trust me, if there was something pretty significant about the locker room, I probably would have known. Although Josh Rosen's attitude in the past, and he's been a big talker when he was with the Cardinals. We didn't see any of that though here. The media didn't see any of that in Miami, at least when we were able to see him in the media. I just think he wasn't a good quarterback, and more people blew it on this. Look, the Cardinals, they drafted him in the and they got rid of him the next. Miami Dolphins, they gave up a second-round pick for him. Like, okay, our future or not, and he wasn't even good enough to start more than like 3 or 4 games. Okay, we're going to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So for a tanking thing, it would have been great to start Josh Rosen. They would have had a better draft pick, but I think Brooks, he's just not a good quarterback, and that's all it is. I don't think it has to do with his attitude. I don't think it has to do with anything he says or has done. I think it's just about on the field. A lot of people whiffed on Josh Rosen, and it happens.
Last thing for you, Super Bowl pick. Who do you like, and who do you think is the one guy that will emerge as MVP?
How do you not say Patrick Mahomes, right? The thing here, Brooks, is you have Patrick Mahomes and a high-power offense that can score in a minute and a half. Running the ball, the 49ers run the ball very well. Tennessee ran the ball very well. It doesn't matter how much of the clock you kill, because you could take an 8 or 9 minute drive and score 3 or 6 or 7 or 8. Patrick Mahomes can go right downfield in a minute and 20 seconds, sometimes even less. So killing the ball doesn't make much of a difference in this game. 49ers, as you know, have a great defense, but in the end, Mahomes, his high power and the ability to get around the field, Brooks, win this game. I'd say they win the game by 10. I think even getting down in this game for them, it's no big deal. Saw them get down. I mean, come on, 24-0, and they had the lead at halftime. Saw them go down to Tennessee. They win the game. So even if we see the same thing here in the Super Bowl on Sunday, Brooks, I think the Kansas City Chiefs. The only thing when we all think one thing, we're like, okay, Patrick Mahomes, and this is going to be his game. It's going to be the Niners defense that may win this game, or the Chiefs offense that might win this game. Sometimes in these Super Bowl, Brooks, as you know, some unhidden, some hidden hero is going to come out, and like right. Jimmy Garoppolo will wind up, being the guy, or the Chiefs defense, like, wow, they appeared. So it's just one of those storylines that maybe we don't see in the end up in this game. But I got to go. I got to say Kansas City wins this game. Patrick Mahomes is the MVP. The interesting part, though, in just the last minute here, asked me, like, okay, one of how many Super Bowls for Patrick Mahomes? And I was like, if I set an over-under, if I was an odds maker, I would actually say Patrick Mahomes gets back to, I'd set the line at one more Super Bowl. And I asked a guy in Vegas, an odds maker in Vegas, what would you set the total at for Patrick Mahomes Super Bowls, including this one, just appearing, not even winning? And he said 2.5. You never know what's going to happen in the NFL, specifically here in Miami. We had Dan Marino. Dan Marino went to the Super Bowl in his second year. And a lot of people thought, oh my gosh, this guy, he's an amazing quarterback. Dan Marino never went back. You've got to really cherish this moment and savor it and sink it all in if you're Patrick Mahomes or even a Chiefs fan. Because no matter what you think, there's going to be new.
You don't have to remind me.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be
50 years, buddy.
50 years, exactly. You just never know if you're going to be back. So, Patrick Mahomes is great. Lamar Jackson's great. And we're going to get some great draft picks coming in. We're in 3 or 4 years from now. Maybe they're there.
Outstanding stuff, man. This has really been great. And we're going to believe me, you're at the very top of my list right now of guys to follow. So keep up the good work, Andy. Thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
My phone was going off there, but it's only my mother, so no scoop. Take care. Folks.
Thanks again, Andy. Take good care. Have a good weekend. That's Andy Slater. Now we're going to go back, stay in Miami. We got the hovercraft in Miami. We're going to be joined by Matt Lombardo of NJ.com. He's covering the Super Bowl for the tri-state areas, NJ.com, informing millions and millions and millions of people what's going on in South Florida. Look at that setup, too. That is beautiful. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Brooks, appreciate you having me on. 77 and sunny here in South Florida. It couldn't be better, not to rub it in. And I think your Chiefs are going to have a great day on Sunday afternoon, which means I think you're in for a pretty good weekend.
Now, we just talked to Andy Slater, a guy who's pretty much in the know when it comes to the Dolphins, when it comes to South Florida. And we talked about the draft coming up, and I want to drill down. There's some interesting things, and you've created some of these things, by the way, with your new piece about Dave Gettleman, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. But let's jump into the draft really fast, and we'll talk about the Super Bowl. But he was saying that he thinks that if the Dolphins are to get Tua, they might still have to move up in the draft. It's a possibility. And so where does that leave us? That leaves us with the Bengals, the Redskins, the Lions, the Giants, the Dolphins. Tua, I mean, what is your thought on Tua? And what is your thought on how those first five slots are going to go? And, of course, with the Giants in mind as well.
Yeah, I think the first two slots, Brooks, are pretty locked in, right? Because you have Joe Burrow going number 1 to Cincinnati, and then Chase Young going number 2 to Washington. And I think that's when the chaos can begin when it comes to Tua watch, because you look at the Detroit Lions, if this is a make or break year for Matt Patricia, that means it's also a make or break year for Matthew Stafford. But would they take the quarterback to try to buy more time for Patricia? Now, if he gets to 4, if the Dolphins don't trade up to number 3 with the Detroit Lions, Brooks, I've mentioned this to you in passing before. I spent 47 minutes talking on the record with Joe Judge on 3 different days. He has not mentioned Daniel Jones' name one time. And conventional wisdom says they'd stick with Daniel Jones. But if you're a first-time head coach in Joe Judge, do you not at least entertain the notion of getting your guy, your quarterback? And if you're not all in on Daniel Jones and Tua is sitting there at 4, what's that conversation like in the Giants' war room? So if the Dolphins are all in on Tua, my thought is you need to get as high as number 3 with the Detroit Lions. You might have to talk them out of taking Tua to make that trade so you can take it.
I think one thing that's not been in this conversation, you're aware of it, I'm aware of it, but in this conversation is all the picks the Dolphins have accrued. I mean, that's the wild card. That's the X factor. You can't just look at it as, well, it'd be nice if we could. No, they have the capital potentially to make that happen. And I just wonder, is there anybody inside the Giants front office or, on the coaching staff, Joe Judge, that you think, because it seems like it would be really hard for me to imagine that a guy in Dave Gettleman that just succeeded in hiring someone like Joe Judge, who he will be able to lord over, and to me really consolidates his power with the Maras, is an indication of his power, that it can maintenance of his power with the Maras, that Dave Gettleman would repudiate the Daniel Jones pick by going with Tua. Does that make sense? Because it was really difficult to see that happening unless there's something going on inside that front office or the coaching staff that's changed that we don't know about.
Yeah, I'll say this. I would be surprised if they take Tua, but it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world, especially when we saw what Arizona did last year by trading Josh Rosen to the Cardinals to go up and get Kyler Murray. With a brand new coaching staff coming in. And I'll take that one step further, that Pat Shurmur was one of the loudest voices advocating for Daniel Jones as the quarterback last year in the war room. He's gone.
Interesting.
Mike Shula, the offensive coordinator / quarterback coach who worked with Daniel Jones last year, he's gone in Denver too, alongside Pat Shurmur. So if Dave Gettleman is all in on Daniel Jones, that's one thing. He'll take the best player available, whether that's Isaiah Simmons or Andrew Thomas or any of the other offensive linemen that are there at 4. But if Gettleman was convinced to take Daniel Jones by Pat Shurmur, and you look at Jones's rookie year with 23 turnovers, at that point in time, do you not entertain the conversation about taking Tua at 4? Now, I think it's still a reach in terms of the likelihood that it happens, but I'm not completely ruling it out either.
And when you think about the analytics side of it and the heat that Gettleman has taken on analytics and how, well, Tua would be an analytics pick, wouldn't he?
Oh, no doubt. And especially when you look at what the Baltimore Ravens are doing in terms of stretching teams thin and then running the football out of those spread formations. You'll get the multitude of sets, and I wrote about this today in my deep dive into the Giants falling behind on analytics, Brooks. The 49ers run with pre-snap motion to dictate to the defense. The 49ers have a multitude of formations where they spread out defenses wide and then run the football, dictating to the defense in unfavorable alignments to stop the run. If you get Tua, who can make plays with his legs, if you get Tua, who can make every throw on the run, if you get Tua, who certainly, if he's healthy, is a multifaceted quarterback, then yes, that would be a pick that's made with analytics in mind. But I'll go even simpler than that. It's a pick where a new head coach and a new coaching staff would have their quarterback, and you could either hold on to Daniel Jones or trade him to acquire further picks to further build out this roster.
Visiting with Matt Lombardo, of course, NJ.com, Newark Star Ledger. It's Matt Lombardo, NFL, all one word on Twitter. And if not the top story out there right now today in NFL media as we approach the Super Bowl, it's certainly at the very top of the list. And it's your article, Matt, that you put together on how the New York Giants fell behind in the analytics game. Can you kind of give us an idea of what your deep dive is about? And of course, people need to go to your Twitter and also click on that over at NJ.com.
Well, appreciate the shout out, Brooks. And the Cliff Notes version is you look at these two teams on Sunday. It's the Chiefs and the 49ers. Both have invested very heavily into analytics. I talked to Chiefs GM Brett Veach about this on Super Bowl opening night, and he told me that if you get behind on analytics and you don't invest in them, it's going to hurt you. Just like if you shortchange the tape, it's going to hurt you as well. John Lynch said you need to have all of the data in front of you, and if it's going to make you better, then you need to use it. And we all know the Giants have been reluctant to adopt analytics. They took Saquon Barkley number 2 overall. You look at them not valuing draft capital. You look at some of the decisions they've made in-game under Pat Shurmur the last couple of years, and it just seems as though hiring 4 computer folks and revamping your software
I had to use that.
is not a commitment to analytics. And I know that there's some counter stories being written about how rushing yards matter, and you look at the rushing yards of these teams. But the 49ers, like we talked about, they spread people thin. They use pre-snap motion. They use situational football mined from data to determine when and how they run the football. The Chiefs are very similar to that. It's all situationally driven, and the Giants don't seem to have been quick to the trigger when it comes to mining and analyzing this data. I talked to a couple analytics experts, and they told me that the Baltimore Ravens, they've created their own metrics, and if you don't have a Baltimore Ravens security clearance, you're not getting access to that data. The Patriots, the Eagles, some of the more advanced...
Don't tell the Astros about that, by the way.
Exactly.
Get under your hat, right?
Some of the more advanced analytics operations in the league are some of the most competitive and winning over the last 5 years. And the Giants, up until this offseason, certainly have seemed stuck in the mud, stuck in a 1980s old school way of thinking. And we'll see if it's anything more than lip service, these 4 computer folks, or if they're going to join the trend of building an analytics department and actually using their data.
All right, I'm not going to let you get away with slipping something in that to my mind is a hot take, is very much a hot take. That I asked you the question about analytics, and you slipped in the Saquon Barkley pick at number 2, as if to say, now I know I'm putting words in your mouth, but as if to say, okay, that wasn't a good pick. It's not an analytics because running backs are overrated. What are you trying to say?
Well, I think,
I'm going to nail you on that.
That's fine, and I'm going to come right back at you, Brooks. And we've done this before, right? You know how I feel about Saquon Barkley, and that opinion is shared by Dave Gettleman, that he's a generational talent and all of that. But you look at the Giants roster at the time, no long-term solution at quarterback, holes along the offensive line. Look at the players that were picked around Saquon Barkley. No pass rush, no cornerback depth to speak of. So you look at what the Giants were, and it's not, and this is a big, point of contention with the non-analytics crowd. It's not that running backs don't matter. Running backs don't matter to the point that the running game does. The running game matters much more than running backs. And that's what you see with the Ravens
49ers.
And the 49ers. And you look at Mostert. You didn't need, where the Giants were, to have a Saquon Barkley to run the football effectively. That's where, when you talk about the analytics of that pick, whether you would have taken Chubb, who got drafted by the Denver Broncos, whether you would have taken the offensive guard Nelson, who went on to have an all-pro rookie year with the Colts, the analytics say those are probably better picks, especially Nelson, if you're trying to build out a running game, than drafting Saquon Barkley and running him behind 2 years with a substandard offensive line his first 2 seasons.
Yeah, and I think, Nelson, when you pair him up with the success Andrew Luck had the previous year, and how Luck kind of almost has sort of a breakout year to a certain extent in the context of a long career, closest thing to it, not a coincidence. So the bottom line is, what we're really saying here is it's more important to have a great offensive coordinator or an offensive mind like Kyle Shanahan. That should be the priority. And a running back, essentially, and I'm going to ask you this question. Really, we're to the point now where there's no if Saquon Barkley is not good enough to be a number 2 pick, there's no running back now at this point in the state of the National Football League that should be in the top 2 or 3. Is that what we're really saying in the draft?
I think it also depends on what your team looks like when you take him. Did your quarterback get hurt the year before and you go 5-11 and you have a great offensive line, but you're fortunate enough to pick him 3rd or 4th, like the Carolina Panthers were with Christian McCaffrey? They have an above-average offensive line. They have a great quarterback. They had some great wide receivers at the time. You could drop McCaffrey into that system. If you wanted to take Saquon Barkley and pair him with Odell Beckham Jr. and Evan Ingram, and then use your other draft capital to build out your offensive line, I think that pick makes a lot more sense and you can be a lot more productive. But to take Barkley in a vacuum, yes, the talent is there, but the value of the position in terms of draft capital and how much of your salary cap that position is going to take up, it's just very difficult to win in today's NFL when the running back is the focal point of a roster that has lots of other holes.
And I agree I agree precisely with what you're saying in many ways. But at number 2, that should never, in my mind, be a need pick. And that's kind of what you're hinting at. If you need this, and this is the final piece in the puzzle, is that kind of what you're saying here? Then go for it. But I think we're to the point where a need pick should never be that high.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a luxury pick. Right. I mean, you look at the Saints. Yes, Alvin Kamara is a matchup nightmare, but you still have Drew Brees and you have Michael Thomas. You look at the Dallas Cowboys. Their offense funnels through Ezekiel Elliott, but with that offensive line at its peak, I don't know. I think, Brooks, you and I could probably combine for 100 rushing yards and a touchdown or 2 behind that line, right? So it's almost like having a Saquon Barkley or a Christian McCaffrey is a luxury in the way that teams are winning in today's NFL, and the Niners are kind of an example of that. Yes, they run the ball, but they run it smart using situational data, and they didn't invest a significant chunk of their salary cap to a running back position.
Visit with Matt Lombardo NFL on Twitter, NJ.com. Let's talk now about the game, because this is an awesome game. It's not just because I'm a Chiefs fan. It really isn't.
I can't wait.
This potential. Yeah, but it's kind of a little bit like, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking what Andy was saying. It wouldn't shock me at all if the Chiefs let me throw a scenario at you. Let me just throw this at you. Let's say the Niners turn the ball over, something happens early on, some binary events, and the Chiefs get out to 21-0 lead. Can the 49ers come? I think this is a really big question. Can the 49ers come back if they're down 21-0, 24-3 early on?
No, because if you're down 24-3 or 21-0, that means the strength of your team, the backbone of your defense, your front seven, isn't getting home and pressuring Patrick Mahomes. At that point, now they can hand the ball to Tyreek Hill. They don't have to take these big chances down the field if you're the Chiefs. You can start to bleed the clock. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo, in a shootout situation, in a 37-34 type of game, he's good enough to keep pace with a Patrick Mahomes and maybe even win the football game if the Chiefs give up a bad special teams play or an untimely turnover late in the fourth quarter. But if they fall behind, I just don't think that they have the weapons in place to not only score enough points, but keep pace with the Kansas City Chiefs. Because if you're up 24-0, I just can't imagine them turtling up and not being able to continue to do what was working and extend that lead.
When you look now at the front seven and you look at a Sherman in the defensive backfield, is there any defense out there better set up to stop a Mahomes if it's possible? I look at Mahomes as an NBA player.
Yeah.
You just can't stop him. He's going to get 30, or James Harden. You just can't stop the points necessarily. But is there a defense better configured, better set up in the NFL right now to stop it?
No, I don't think so. And I think that we saw with the Tennessee Titans a week ago, they jump out to that big lead. You kind of had the feeling, okay, all we need is one big play, and we're going to get back in this thing. I think that if that happens again with Armstead and with Bosa and with Sherman on the back end and the amount of talent that the 49ers have, it's going to be a lot more difficult for the Chiefs to come back. So that's why, to me, Brooks, this game comes down to who wins along the line of scrimmage? Because you know all the speed and talent is on the Kansas City side of the field. But if Armstead and Bosa can knock Mahomes around, create a couple turnovers, and if San Francisco jumps out to a 21-0 lead or a 24-3 lead, then they can run the ball down your throat and shorten the game in a way that I don't think even the Titans were able to do. So it comes down to Kansas City getting a fast start and keeping Mahomes upright. If they do those two things, I think they win the game, and they might win it rather comfortably.
Who are some of the guys, or maybe just one guy that people aren't talking about enough that will play a major role? He might not even get the publicity coming out of the game.
Yeah.
But who are the guys? And it's kind of hard it's a hard sell to say Frank Clark's that guy as if people don't know who he is, or Matthew or guys like that. But who are some of the underlying guys that we should be watching as we're watching the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I got one for you. How about Stefan Wisniewski, who's one of the guards along the Chiefs' offensive line? If we're saying that this game is won along the line of scrimmage, he's going to be in charge of keeping Armstead out of the backfield. He's going to be in charge of, helping call out the stunts that the 49ers like to call up front with their linebackers and defensive linemen. Offensive linemen never get a whole lot of credit anyway, but I think their play is going to determine what happens in this game. And on the Kansas City or the San Francisco side of things, I think Emmanuel Sanders needs to have a big game because you know what George Kittle can do. You know what Mostert can do. There's been a couple drops for Sanders in the playoffs, but he was instrumental in the second half of the season to what they did offensively. And if he's able to win the battle in the slot, get some yards after the catch, then I think he could become a difference maker and maybe a sleeper candidate to be in that MVP conversation.
You're covering the Super Bowl for millions of people in the tri-state, and you've got to make important decisions every night, every day. While you're down in South Florida, obviously you're covering the Giants. You did a big story about analytics, probably number one hot button for the Giants. Great story.
Appreciate
it's out
that.
today. But what's your strategy as a guy who is presenting the Super Bowl to the New York City area as you continue to cover it? What is your thought process every day? Take us into that world.
Yeah, Brooks, it's kind of crazy. This event is very difficult to cover if you want to come in and just cover the Super Bowl and write about the game. You have to go and find the stories that nobody else is writing. You have to use this time to get access to the people you might not have access to finish out a bigger picture idea, such as the analytics story when I had the chance to talk with Brett Veach and John Lynch this week. I have a story coming tomorrow, an extensive profile on Britt Reed and him overcoming addiction, 2 incarcerations, and the overdose death of his older brother to be on Andy Reid's staff as the linebacker coach. That's the type of story that you look at the teams, you look at the rosters and say, okay, that's a very interesting human interest type of story. Did
that story start with you in Philadelphia? Is that a story that's years in the making?
It's something that I followed the story when I was in Philadelphia growing up, and then, of course, covering the Eagles and getting to know the Reid family a little bit. But you have the opportunity now to speak to some of the people around Britt Reid. LaShawn McCoy was in Philadelphia at the same time, so he was able to give a little bit of a then and now type of perspective. But I think that the way you cover the Super Bowl well is to come in with a couple of ideas and to, get away from the media pack, go to a couple of the availabilities, get out into Miami, try to do some stories on guys that might not have any connection to the game. Last year, I profiled Grant Haley, one of the Giants slot cornerbacks, and his mother's battle with a rare kidney disorder and how he was using his platform as an NFL player to raise awareness. She eventually found a kidney 6 months ago. She's doing well. So you try to find those stories that nobody else can find, because if you're just walking around Radio Row trying to get the opinion of analysts, current and former players of the Chiefs and the Niners, you're just going to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. And so can you compare now what Miami is like as Miami is this classic Super Bowl site, but it kind of isn't anymore because we're in Detroit. We're in all these other places.
I was in Minnesota 2 years ago. Yeah.
Right.
Well, sorry about that. I was in Minnesota
That's
2 years ago, and I think I'm still kind of thawing out from that experience. And obviously 70 degrees and sunny in January for a guy from the Northeast is a lot more comfortable than -7 every day and snow every night in Minnesota. I think Miami's been great from an ambiance standpoint. The atmosphere makes you feel like you're at the Super Bowl in a way that even Atlanta and certainly Minnesota didn't. But I think that this Super Bowl has just been very spread out. They have the media staying out by the airport, the convention center's in Miami Beach, and the game itself is in Miami Gardens. So it's a lot more spread out. It's a lot more traveling. It's a lot of time for people who want to know what it's like covering the Super Bowl. It's a lot of time sitting on shuttle buses, in Ubers, and walking around convention centers during the week getting ready for the game.
So when it comes to actually covering the game itself, what's your thought process? You talked about bringing things to the table that are different. I mean, a lot of it sounds like you're assessing, okay, what are my own assets? Who do I know coming in?
Correct.
All of those things. But how do you approach covering the game when there's millions of other people covering that actual game? What sort of things you're going to look at?
Yeah, we're going to have our planning meeting either later this afternoon or tomorrow, but certainly the type of, if there's a big play in the game, try to get somebody to react to that play. I have a couple stories in mind in terms of guys who've overcome some adversity to win the game. Certainly if Andy Reid wins, that's going to be a significant storyline for us because we do cover the Eagles as well as the Giants and the Jets. So relating it back to him overcoming the adversity in Philadelphia and what he's built now with his second chance with the Kansas City Chiefs, that's going to play a factor. But a lot of it's game dependent. A lot of it's dependent on what happens in that game. And I think that these two matchups, these two teams aren't short on storylines. That's for sure.
Well, one thing I want to quickly, we're going to let you go because you're damn busy. But by the way, I love the background noise. I love the ambiance. We have the whole Cuban music thing going. We got the street. It's actually really, really cool. I really enjoyed this. Is exactly what we were hoping for.
Yeah, we're down. We're in the throes of Super Bowl week down here in South Beach, Brooks.
Right. But I want to drill down on one thing, and I'm a Kansas City guy, as you know, and excited about the game and excited about Andy Reid. And, okay, what's the future of Andy? What's going on? And you're a guy who knows Andy Reid and from your days covering the Eagles, breaking stories with the Eagles. You got a big story coming out about his family. So give us a little insight. Do you think where is his head? Let's say they win. I think if they lose the game, everybody can kind of agree that he's going to be back. But what about if they win? And what about let's say he comes back no matter what, that's another scenario. What do you think the ultimate succession plan is in the back of his mind as it pertains to the future of the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think Brooks, he's back regardless because as long as he has Patrick Mahomes, he has a kid who's going to put him in a position to go to and win multiple Super Bowls. I think the AFC for the foreseeable future, when you look at the Tom Brady era winding down in New England, you're looking at two teams. It's Kansas City and it's Baltimore. The road to the Super Bowl goes through those two teams for the next several years. Mahomes is the best quarterback walking the planet right now, and I think that Andy Reid legitimately loves him. Think back to last year. How many times when the defense was on the field was Andy Reid literally sitting on the bench next to Mahomes and diagramming plays and looking at the tablet to see what's coming next? I think you look around the league, he's only 61 years old, which is rather young for an NFL head coach. You look at Bill Belichick being 66 and some tumult taking place in New England. I think Reid sees that and sees that as long as I have Mahomes, I can ride this thing out. So I think that Reid will be back next year and for multiple years to come. If they win Sunday, I think Eric Bieniemy becomes, as he should, a top coaching candidate elsewhere. But as long as he's on the staff, I think that Bieniemy or Mike Kafka might be the ultimate successors. But they might have to wait 2 or 3 years to get that role, if not longer.
Are the Chiefs in this spot without Brett Veach?
No, because I think that, him and Andy have worked very collaboratively. And as I wrote today, I think that their use of analytics combined with traditional scouting has been, instrumental in them building out this roster. I think that everybody's on the same page. And you look at the moves they've made, the players they've drafted the last 2 or 3 years, I think that Veach has been instrumental in their success.
By the way, that's to me the number one name that's not out there. That hopefully it will get out there. Is that one of the unsung names, if it's possible in the Super Bowl? I think the number one name is probably Brett Veach. It's astonishing to me that he hasn't gotten more run. But let's bottom line it now. Let's bottom line the game. I like the 49ers in this game. I like the over in this game. Where are you going with it?
I like the Chiefs in the over. I think it's a shootout, and I think it comes down to who's the better quarterback. And Jimmy Garoppolo is a tremendous game manager, better than that in some situations. It's new school versus old school in a lot of ways. And I think that when you look at Mahomes, you look at his ability to take over a game down 21-0, down 24-3, whatever the odds are in the early contests of a game. I think Mahomes is a difference maker. I think he's the biggest difference maker in the NFL. So give me the Chiefs in this one. I like them winning 37-34.
And finally, God, it sounds like you're working your ass off. You need to stop working so hard. But so is there any relaxation here? And if there is for you, what is it going to be? Or what have you already been involved in it?
There might or might not be some golf that's played early Saturday morning. There might or might not be some time on the beach Saturday afternoon. And there might or might not have already been a couple of cigars imported from about 70 miles south from here that have been enjoyed over the last couple of days.
That's phenomenal, man. It's been so much fun visiting with you. Just outstanding stuff. Thanks so much, Matt.
I appreciate you having me on, Brooks. Enjoy the game, all right?
That's Matt Lombardo, NFL, all one word on Twitter. You got to check him out. And is this guy an up-and-coming star or what? I'm watching this guy. Why? How is this guy not on Get Up right now? Seriously. I mean, phenomenal stuff. Just great stuff. And I mean, you talk about if you're someone from the tri-state reading his stuff every day, you're getting the Dave Gettleman stuff. To me, the Giants and the conversation that we had from Andy Slater talking about the Dolphins. Now, when he said, I think the Dolphins are going to need to move up to get to it, I'm like, what? What are you talking about? But then after talking directly to a guy who knows the Giants draft picture as well as anybody walking around right now, just did a big piece about it. Matt Lombardo. Wait a minute. Did you hear what Matt said about Daniel Jones? And I didn't hear it. We've had Matt on a couple of times in the last month. I really didn't hear what he was saying before about, remember how Matt has said to us a couple of times that Joe Judge had talked to him. I guess Matt said this time he talked to Joe Judge 47 minutes one-on-one on the record. And Joe Judge had never mentioned Daniel Jones. Now, I took that as, wait a minute, why did they hire Joe Judge? That explains why Bill Belichick recommended his special teams coach. The dude is clueless. No, that's not really what Matt was communicating because I'm too much of a dummy. What he's saying is Daniel Jones may well not be in the plans, or at least as solid as people think, right? And it came together today when Matt pointed out to me and you, okay, he was Pat Shurmur's pick. It wasn't necessarily Gettleman being all in on him. Now you go back to Slater, a guy who knows the Dolphins, earlier on this show saying, hey, the Dolphins may not get him. He may not last to 5, right? And now we're going over and talking about the Giants with an expert. Now things are starting to make sense. They're starting to make sense about what may play out here with the Giants. And you think about how Tua represents an analytics-driven pick. It could, in the minds of people. How Tua could be a guy, if you draft him. Listen, this is really fascinating. Let's say you're Gettleman. Let's say you're the Giants and you draft Tua. All right. And then you say, he's probably not going to be able to play for a year. First of all, I don't know how you do that. You got Daniel Jones there. I don't know what would happen there. But let's say they did draft it. You would have a year honeymoon there where Tua isn't even going to necessarily play. And then when he comes back in 2 years, well, how much is he really going to? Well, we're easing him back in. We're easing him in. You got like 2 years of party time if you're Dave Gettleman of a lack of accountability, theoretically, right? And having talked to Matt Lombardo now at length, the guy who's on the ground with the Giants, hey, this would not, if this stuff plays out, if the Giants maybe go away from Daniel Jones, remember where you heard it. You heard it from Matt Lombardo on this show. Outstanding stuff today. Very interesting dynamic that I didn't anticipate. I don't think anybody does right now, but it's playing out, and you saw it play out on this show, what may happen. So that's going to do it for today's show. Our thanks to Andy Slater, Fox Sports Radio 640, all one word, Andy Slater, all one word on Twitter. You really need to follow Andy Slater, especially now. If you're going to do it, take the plunge, follow him on Twitter. Matt Lombardo, NFL, all one word, NJ.com on Twitter. Outstanding job today. A lot of fun as always with him. That guy needs to get his own podcast, Matt Lombardo. Outstanding job. And once again, great job by Cam Smith. Tomorrow, Michelle Tafoya will join us along with a cast of thousands as we continue to break the Super Bowl down for you. But that's going to do it tomorrow, noon Eastern time, every weekday. And my name is Brooks Melchior, live from Los Angeles, California, saying so long. This has been Sports by Brooks on Fancred.